Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. So thank you very much for inviting me. And I look forward to working with you on this miserable Saturday morning, also miserable in the UK. So I don't feel I'm missing out. So I'll share my slides and we'll get started. Right. Just make sure that's as it should be. So hopefully you can all see that clearly. So the title I've given it is Negotiating the Ethical Space of Participatory Action Research. And I know that you are an action research network, and some of you will be doing participatory research. Some of you may feel you're not. There's a huge issue about how you define action research, but very often it is participatory because inevitably you're engaged in practice situations working for change. So a range of practitioners or service users or students may be co-researchers alongside you. But I'll just quickly give my description of how I understand participatory action research, just so we know where we're starting. It's a collaborative effort. People whose lives might be affected by the issues being researched are partners in all or some parts of the research process, often with the aim of influencing socially just change. And the kind of research I do, which is linked to a centre in Durham called the Centre for Social Justice and Community Action, is about trying to change society or change policies and practices. And the process inevitably aims to be democratic, participatory, empowering, and educational. Fine terms, fine ideals, but how do we put those into practice? Because, as you know from your experience of action research, it's unpredictable, it's emergent, we can't predict how it's going to pan out. It requires flexibility and creativity. So the ethical struggles are partly related, I think, to this unpredictability. We can't just sit there tight and follow rules or codes of ethics or rely on our research ethics committees to keep us right. We have to do a lot of work ourselves. In fact, I call this ethics work. And I have a very broad conception of ethics as a topic. And it's about questions about what kind of lives we should lead, what counts as a good society, what actions are right and wrong, what qualities of character or virtues we should develop, and what responsibilities we humans have for both each other and the ecosystem. So that's, as I say, a very broad definition. You can see how, as soon as you look at that, ethics is an integral part of our everyday lives as well as our practice as researchers. And it's very difficult to pull out the ethical parts from our ordinary practice as researchers. So it requires effort to do that kind of identification, to look at the work we're doing with a critical ethical lens. And I think one of the things we have to bear in mind at the moment is what I call the changing context for participatory action research. And I think this is true in Ireland and other parts of the world as well as the UK. We've been seeing this participatory turn now for several decades, haven't we, in policy, service delivery and research. And there's a much greater popularity of participatory action research amongst researchers. We've had participatory action research for a long time, since before the 70s, but often it's been a sort of marginal, on the side, a little bit off-piste, but it's becoming more popular. Funders and universities are recognizing this, and it's partly because funders and universities want to make a social and economic impact with the research they support, and they realize that research that is action-based does inevitably, well, if it works well, produce some kind of impact. If it doesn't change the policy or practice world, it certainly changes the people doing the research. It's also linked, I think, with the decolonizing agenda. This is a word that everybody's using now, and I won't go into a critique of it because often it's used in a rather meaningless way, but it is a serious agenda insofar as it's about trying to promote greater democracy in the research context, to enable people, groups who are easily ignored and marginalized and who perhaps never get a chance to engage in research, to actually do that, and to take some of the control and power away from those of us like me who are academics in the higher education sector. And so another term that trips off the end of the tongue these days is lived experience, increasingly valued. Academic expertise, yes, we need that, but actually the experience of the people who are on the ground living their daily lives, whether it's in schools, hospitals, communities, and know about the topics being researched is valued. At the same time, of course, we have more and more regulations. The institutional research ethics committees are growing, their demands are growing. So this, what I call mainstreaming of participatory action research, brings opportunities and challenges. When what we do starts to move from the margins to the centre, we feel relief and joy, but at the same time, a little bit of trepidation, because with its popularity, there are the dangers of poor participatory practice. As those of you who are action researchers and participatory researchers well know, it's not an easy road to take, is it? You need more time, you need more skills in relationship building, in negotiation, conflict resolution, you need to be a good facilitator, negotiator, etc. So many people, including many PhD students who may think that they can get on this track, find it actually quite difficult, because there isn't the time and the institutions don't understand it enough. So there is a need for extra scrutiny of participatory research, but on the other hand, we don't want too much narrow scrutiny. This institutional regulation of our research ethics committees, whether they're in the local authorities, the schools, the health sector, the university sector, they often have pro forma applications, and they're asking for all sorts of different assessments and risk assessments and for prediction in advance, and this doesn't always suit the participatory action research. So we have a difficult path to follow. And as was mentioned, I've done quite a lot of work on ethical challenges, which really interest and excite me, collecting people's stories and examples from across the world. And Marilena, who's here from Germany, is a member of the ethics working group of the International Collaboration for Participatory Health Research, has been working with me on some of these. And 4 areas I've just pulled out for today. Conveniently, the 4 R's. We always have to have some alliteration, don't we? So we've got 4 R's today. It isn't a comprehensive account of all the areas of ethical challenge, and they do overlap enormously, but let's just use that for focus. So regulation, I mentioned research ethics review. I think you all will have experience of this, the lack of understanding of the forms, the assumption that people are either participants or researchers, so ignoring the idea that there may be many co-researchers. There's an assumption that the community-based researchers might be vulnerable, therefore they have to be protected by the quotes professional researcher. Often full details of design, etc., are wanted at the start. Many of these research ethics committees don't invite staged approvals, that is, approval for just going out and doing a bit of connection and partnership development, and then stage 2 might be the actual design, and stage 3 might be the actual methods. Often they invite sort of amendments. You've got to go back and make a few adjustments. Often they don't consider who owns the outputs, the articles, the films, the guidance, whatever it might be. And basically they're imposing institutional concerns, which are often very risk averse. So it's putting the ethics onto a form, the tick box or regulatory ethics, which of course doesn't fit what any social researchers do. We do have to have some regulation, but it needs to be proportional.